Look at that hand, right there, on your screen, in the FBI's own footage. That right hand hanging at the suspect's side, barely moving, barely functioning, gripping that piece of shrubbery not with his fingers, but with just his thumb. Now look at his left hand, natural, relaxed, moving the way a hand moves when nothing is wrong with it. And then look at the right hand again. Because I have been staring at that footage for days now, frame by frame, screenshot by screenshot. And I am going to tell you something tonight that the mainstream news has not put together yet. Something that changes the entire profile of the man who walked up to Nancy Guthrie's front door in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. He was injured. And I do not mean a minor scratch. I do not mean a bruise he walked in with. I mean, based on everything visible in that footage, this man's right hand was not working the way a healthy hand works. The movement pattern is wrong. The grip behaviour is wrong. The way he favours his left hand consistently throughout the entire sequence is wrong. And if I am right about this, then right now, tonight, there is a man somewhere in this country walking around with a hand that tells the story of what he did to an 84-year-old woman in Tucson, Arizona. And the FBI needs to find him. Welcome to Brian Records. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe right now, hit that bell. We cover cases exactly like this one, cases where the details in plain sight are the ones that nobody is talking about. Stay with me through this entire video because I'm going to build this theory piece by piece, layer by layer, and by the end you are going to see something in that footage you cannot unsee. Let's go. First, let's establish what we know for certain. Before I take you into the injury analysis, I need to make sure everyone watching this is standing on solid ground. Because what I am about to build is a detailed theory. And a detailed theory only holds weight if the foundation is rock solid. So let me give you the verified, confirmed, publicly established facts of this case. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of the NBC Today show. She lives alone in a home in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, Arizona, a quiet, well-maintained neighborhood in the desert hills north of the city. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy had dinner with family. One of her daughters and her son-in-law. They ate together, played games, had a normal Saturday evening. At 5:32 in the afternoon, Nancy had taken an Uber to get there. At 9:48 in the evening, a family member drove Nancy home. They watched her go inside. The garage door opened, she entered, and the garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. That is the last time anyone who loves Nancy Guthrie saw her alive. Now the timeline of what happened in the hours that followed. At 1:47 in the morning, Nancy's doorbell camera went offline. Not because of a technical malfunction, not because of a power outage, because someone physically disconnected it. That is a critical distinction. Doorbell cameras do not simply turn off in the middle of the night. Someone at that front door, in the early hours of February 1st, reached up and killed that camera deliberately. 25 minutes pass, dark minutes. Minutes with no electronic eyes on that front door. At 2:12 in the morning, the camera's motion detection software registered movement at the front door. But because Nancy did not have an active recording subscription, no footage was saved automatically. The FBI, using Google's technical support teams, later recovered images from that camera that were not supposed to exist. We will come back to how that happened, because it matters. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. Her pacemaker transmits data continuously to her cardiologist. It is an automatic, constant process. At 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, it stopped, and it never reconnected. That is the last electronic trace of Nancy Guthrie in her own home. When her family came to check on her that Sunday afternoon, after she missed her virtual church service, they found her phone inside, her wallet, her hearing aid, her daily medications, her car still in the driveway. They found red staining on her front porch. DNA testing confirmed that blood was hers. They called 911 at 12:03 p.m. Deputies arrived at 12:15, and the investigation that would eventually produce the most analysed surveillance footage in a missing person case in modern American history had officially begun. The footage. The FBI retrieved and what it shows. Now I need to walk you through exactly what is in that footage, because if you have not watched it carefully, if you have just seen the news clips, you have missed the details that matter. 10 days after Nancy disappeared, on February 10th, the FBI released video and still images from the doorbell camera at her home. This footage was extracted using technical support from Google, which manufactures the Nest doorbell camera. A law enforcement source told CNN that Google provided critical assistance in recovering these images. So right from the start, we are dealing with footage that was not supposed to be there. Footage that only exists because the FBI had the technical capability and the relationships to pull it back from a camera that had been disconnected. And here is what that footage shows. A figure, male, masked, wearing a ski mask that covers his entire face, gloves on both hands, long dark pants, a dark zip-up jacket, a backpack on his back, which forensic analysis later identified as a 25-litre Ozark Trail hiker pack sold exclusively at Walmart, a gun holster positioned at his waist, front-mounted, also purchased at Walmart, according to Sheriff Nanos. The figure approaches Nancy's front door. He moves toward the camera. He raises his left hand and attempts to block the lens with his gloved palm. He steps back. He looks at the ground. He bends down and picks up a piece of shrubbery, vegetation from Nancy's front yard, and attempts to use it to cover the camera. This fails. The camera continues to capture him. He then uses the shrubbery repeatedly in an attempt to obstruct the view. Fails again. Body language expert Susan Constantine of Fox 35 analysed this footage frame by frame. She told reporters that the suspect displayed what she called deadly intent, a terrifying term, through his complete lack of facial tension, steady blink rate, and overall composure. She said, quote, "If this is actually the person who abducted her, and he had no fear of walking in, which is very similar or consistent with sociopathic personality, they can carry out that event with no remorse or concern whatsoever." Let me sit with that for a moment. A trained body language expert is telling us that the man in this footage has the behavioural profile of someone who feels no fear and no remorse about what he is doing. That is not just chilling. From an investigative standpoint, that tells us something critical about who we are dealing with. This is not a desperate, impulsive criminal who saw an opportunity. This is someone who came prepared, came composed, and came with a very specific mission. And that mission cost Nancy Guthrie everything. The hand that changes everything. Now we get to the heart of this video. I want you to think about something before I walk you through this analysis. When you are standing at someone's front door in the middle of the night, when you are reaching up to block a camera, when you are bending down to pick something up from the ground, your hands work automatically. You do not think about which hand to use. You just use whatever hand is natural. Most people are right-handed. Roughly 90% of the human population uses their right hand as their dominant hand. When you reach for something, you use your right hand. When you grab something off the ground, you use your right hand. When you push against the wall, right hand. When you carry something, right hand does the work. Now watch this suspect. Every time a task requires effort, a real, deliberate, physical task, he uses his left hand. He raises his left hand to block the camera. He bends down and grabs the shrubbery with his left hand. When he turns, and the footage gives us a brief but visible look at how he is actually holding that piece of foliage, his right hand is not gripping it with his fingers. His fingers are not closing around the stem. He is holding it with his thumb. Only his thumb. Now I need you to think about what that means medically. When a hand is severely sprained, a grade 2 or grade 3 sprain, or when a hand bone is fractured, the specific motion that becomes most painful, most difficult, most functionally compromised is finger flexion. Closing your fingers, gripping, squeezing. Your thumb retains some independence because its mechanics are partially separate from the finger flexor tendons. You can hold something loosely with just your thumb, even when your fingers cannot close properly around an object. That is exactly what this suspect appears to be doing with his right hand throughout this footage. He is not using his fingers to grip. He is compensating with his thumb. And he is doing it consistently, not just once, not just in one frame, but throughout the entire sequence, every time his right hand comes into view. A private detective who publicly analysed the footage in